Hey all, Scott here from Art of the Genre. I'm here again with Hal at 13th Warlock, and we're going to talk today on our little show about bosses, evil in a campaign, and I guess really how to make them as interesting as possible, and not just as kind of big globs of hit points that you've got to grind your way through. So
Yeah.
um, that's what we're going to do today. I don't know how long it's going to take us, but we'll see about it. But do you have anything to add, Hal?
Yeah, no, the goal today and what I'd like to get across, is the importance and some techniques and some steps on how to not like you said, make a thing at the end of the adventure, some kind of glob of hit points, but a compelling villain in a campaign to really motivate the players to bring the campaign to life and take kind of things to the next level. We talked a lot last week about making characters come alive for the players, and there is nothing more important than or no easier way to make a character come alive for a player than to present a compelling three-dimensional villain. It's essential.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And it's one of the things I know when I run, and I've run a lot of stuff. One of my favorite things to do, and it's probably in the same fashion for a lot of people. If you're an old school player, you've got really classic old TSR dungeons, right? Modules, and you'll find those as great dungeon crawls. A lot of times they'll be perfect for murder hoboing, going through, getting your experience, getting your magic items, and then clearing out. But one of the things you don't see in a lot of those adventures is the advent of a really good villain in a lot of them. I mean, they do exist, but they're not the norm that you'll see in that. So this hopefully will give you an opportunity when you look at something like that, or you like to run those things, or you want to have something pre-generated. Will also give you maybe some tips to add something in, or take something that's already inside it and blow it up further, like utilizing Snur, let's say, in the Fire Giant Lord, and making him more of a villain than just somebody that sits in a room with a bunch of his cohorts and you have to clear it out.
Right, 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 right. I think people are generally doing one or two things with their campaigns. They're either running their own campaign where they're sitting down with a pen and pencil and they're writing everything up, and that's how they're playing it, or they're doing a series of pre-bought campaigns, or a combination of the two. And it's very difficult when you're making or you're buying a campaign, which is like generally these are one shots or maybe a three-shot series or something like that, three or four-shot series, to make a villain that can stand the test of time. Most of them are that big boss at the end of the dungeon. They're very one-dimensional, and the reward for the player is, yeah, you overcome this big baddie, and yeah, you get the loot and whatever that he's got in his trap treasure chest. But after that's done, there's no more satisfaction to it. The players don't walk away feeling like, you know what, I really just got rid of a real pain in my ass. This guy was a real thorn in my side, and now I got rid of him. That's what the key is. And I think the number one thing that you have to do when you're coming up with a campaign villain is that the dungeon master really has to buy into the villain and really has to love the villain, because the most interesting part of any story is the villain. And so the DM needs to be like, this guy is really cool. I can make a story around this guy. They just got to be careful that it doesn't become a player versus DM kind of a exchange where they fall in love with the villain so much that they want to, now they're trying to beat the players. But
Right.
if they can take a character that they're really gravitating towards, and like one of the guys that I've always loved, um, in the D&D adventures, first edition D&D adventures, was Sakatha from Tomb of the Lizard Man King.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's a lizard man. He came across the ring of three wishes. He made one wish to be able to cast spells, and he made another wish on his deathbed that he'll be able to drink the blood of the people that killed him, his enemies. And so the wish was granted like 100 and some years later, and he returns from the dead as a vampire. So he's a vampiric lizard king. I have a soft spot in my heart for lizard men, and this guy
Yeah, we
was
know this. Yeah.
yeah, I love him. I love him. And so this guy really played an important role in my last campaign, and kind of everything was sort of set up building around him, and the players like have a problem with him, like he's before the module even starts, he's caused problems with them in prior adventures, and that calls for a bit of foreplanning, and I think that any good villain that a DM wants to put out, they're going to have to invest in that foreplanning and say, okay, well, how can I interject this villain a little bit in this adventure that doesn't have anything to do with him? How can I make him a little thorn in the side so that the players are thinking about him? They don't necessarily have to be on the hunt for this bad guy, but maybe he's the lord of a city, a mayor of a city or something, and he's putting some taxes out. Or maybe he's hired a thief and the thief has stolen something from the players. Like he's a problem for them. That's I think the good starting point.
Right. I mean, obviously, with bad guys, you're talking about layering, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Various layers to this person, various layers that they're discovering until peeling back the onion kind of, until
Mhm.
you get to this to the core of what this is. And
Yeah.
that's really going to lie in the course of the DM, like you said, to create the villain or utilize a villain and expand on it. One of the things I would suggest, always try to get yourself a good picture in your mind of what this villain is, but also try to get some artwork of the villain if you can. Pick a good picture, find something that you like, and then you're able to build off that and create a story or a little bit of backstory for this person. And again, you can't fall into the trap of having it be your character and you versus the players, but make sure that they're that they're going to be involved in some fashion. And one of the things that I found that probably that some of the best villains that I've seen in my play is to utilize a sense of betrayal in some fashion. A lot of the greatest villains I've had were NPCs that were friends, or
Yes.
somebody that somebody has met within the course of a module. I'm still running Temple of Elemental Evil that you're in, but during the course of Temple of Elemental Evil, there are four, priests of each element, right? And the characters got down a certain level, and they're not really sure what to do, but they've taken on some earth elemental guys, and then they run into this basically bedraggled air priest, and he's like, hey, I don't want any trouble with you guys, but I know how you can get water and fire. And they're like, okay, I guess we'll deal with this guy if we have to, if he's going to get us the back door in, right? And so they have to go through all these different temples and kill these things until there's finally at the end of the water temple, when they've you know killed the water priest. This guy's already told them, you have to get into this giant pool where there's a captured merman, and you have to get him. You have to kill him before something happens. So they all dive in. It's acid. He knows once these guys have killed the thing, then he can betray them, and then his own people come in, and they just detest him, right? Because he was with them so long,
Yeah.
and something like that. And so that is a way that you can make a villain memorable,
Mhm.
and that sense of betrayal. And I've obviously there's been a lot of those things that happen through the course of adventures, but that's great if you can use something like that, or an NPC that might have even started with the people to begin with, but just finds a little power, a little something that corrupts them.
That's yeah, and I think like that example has a couple key elements in it. Number one, the NPC is not presented as a villain in the beginning. I mean, he's shadowy, and the players know. I don't know about this guy, but
Right.
he's not a straight up villain. They don't open the door and he comes and attacks them.
Right.
Then he's got something to offer. A good villain always has something to offer, to kind of draw the players in. So they're not thinking murder hobo. They're thinking, well, maybe I can deal with him. Maybe I can. And, then you set the shield up. That's a kind of step 3. In that case, it was he has the information. They can't just take it and kill it because he's got even more information, that he kind of piecemeals out. He's got the drop on the fire elemental people, and he's got a drop on the water, so they gotta, and then the betrayal happens, and now they're like, oh, this guy. And they really, by the time they get to that point, they really, really hate this guy. So when they beat him, it doesn't matter how much gold is in his trap chest. It doesn't matter how magic his robe is or the mace that he's carrying. The victory for the players comes that they beat this guy that they absolutely hate. Now you have emotion at the table. Now you have a real story. Now you have a campaign that means something to the people sitting around the table. That's everything.
Right. And that's just, I mean, obviously there are a lot of different ways that we're going to hopefully go through a lot of them where you build stuff. That is the close betrayal. And one, like you said, the someone who, let's say controls the city and taxes or something like that. I had a campaign, I didn't run it, but I was run in it by my close friend Mark. And for a good 15 to 20 years, we were fighting against like an all-powerful wizard who was always involved in all the crap that we had to get involved in. Multiple campaigns, multiple characters. You always knew this guy was there. He was always kind of pulling the marionette cords on everything. And you always think, I'll never get to him. I'll never get to him. But that moment, it was almost anticlimactic because it took 20 years to do it. And it was like, he's dead? I really got him, because he'd gotten away so many times, or he's gotten away with it. So, where you're just like, oh my gosh, but we got him. It took us 20 years in real life, but we actually got this guy, and that's one of the things. And when you play somebody like that, that's so big or has so many things to do, you get a relationship with them, a relationship with evil, in the fact that I call it the Joker syndrome, where the Joker never wants to kill Batman, but he always is messing with him, right? In some greater scheme. And that's what you're talking about, somebody that's this big as an evil or something like that. If you want to play this around it, they're messing with they think that the characters are pieces on a chessboard where they're playing something else, right? And eventually those pieces can break free and get the person that's manipulating them, but they see it as a different kind of relationship where maybe they fixate on one character, and it's like, I could kill every other person that's around you, but I won't kill you, Batman. That kind of thing, where I'll make you suffer, I'll make you do the thing, and you just can't stand this person. And that's a great boss to have too.
Definitely. I think also, and we were talking earlier about where you're finding these things, and you can find them at the back of the adventure, as the boss, and you now elaborate on them. But you also can let your players introduce the villains for you. Like they go into a town and they start, interacting with people. Maybe somebody rubs them the wrong way for whatever reason,
It
maybe
happens.
yeah, it happens. It happens in every single campaign that the players will do something. It's not a combat situation. Maybe it's a shopkeeper that they can't haggle with, and maybe they don't like the voice that you're using for the guy who's running the tavern. Maybe they are a couple gold pieces short of buying a heal at the local temple, and now they have a real issue with the priest who's running the temple. If you keep an ear open and you listen to the players sitting around the table as they talk, and they start expressing a loathing for this particular character, you're halfway there. Now you just have to say, well, how can I put some more backing behind it? How can I make this guy really villainous? Because as of right now, his only job is to sell heals to the players when they come into the temple, or his only job is to sell rooms and drinks to the players. He's not.
Yep.
Now you got to think, okay, well, I'm the DM. I know where the adventure's going. Maybe this big bad guy at the end is this guy, or is his brother, or is working for this guy, or and you can tie it in. I have a I'm kind of running a conglomeration of adventures based on the Keep on the Borderlands world. And so I've sort of done the Keep on the Borderlands world, but I've expanded it out. And as I bring other adventures into it, I kind of have been making my own map. Um, so in one of it, I'm trying to think of the adventure that I was running at the Mines of Ilfarn or something like that. Um, Something Ilfarn, something that has to do with Ilfarn. It was a first edition, second edition game. It came out right on the cusp of the two of them, and it talks about the whole thing is like these dwarven mines of Ilfarn or whatever. But it centers around Daggerfell in the Forgotten Realms, which is just I think it's just a little south of Waterdeep. For those
Okay,
that
yeah.
are familiar with
Daggerfall. Yeah, yeah.
Daggerfall. So I
Hey
renamed.
Lane, I just want to say hi to you there. I know you're on our side here. Never give a DM, a GM any ideas. There you go.
So where are you
We'll
seeing?
run with it. If you give us something to work with, we'll likely
Yeah,
take it and work
I
with
don't
it.
see
Yeah,
people. Wait. Comments. Oh, here we go. Comments. All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. I see Lane is in there.
Yeah.
Lane's one of my players, so I gotta watch what I said. Oh,
You'll find all your
I can't
secrets.
get too
Watch
much
out.
out. But anyway, so I changed the name from Daggerfell to Hammerfell, and I that was their base of operations. There's not any kind of insidious. I didn't plan for any kind of insidiousness or evil to take place in Hammerfell. But as the players were heroes, the ruling people in the city kind of started to play a factor. They were giving quests out, they were working for them. So through the course of their adventures, they start to develop a problem with Hammerfell. Um, that's the guy's name, Mayor Hammerfell. Everybody is named. The cities are all named after them. It helps me keep things tracked in my mind. So like you were saying, you have put a picture in your mind of this guy and how you were envisioning him. The envisioned picture I had of him was the guy who was in Lord of the Rings. He was the guy that was constantly stuffing food in his face in the White City. The guy who
Oh,
was the father.
yeah,
What was
the
his name? What I'm talking
Denethor. Denethor, yeah.
Yeah. So that's who I'm picturing, right? So every time they go and see this guy, he's always sitting there at the table. He's always eating food. He's licking his fingers. He's completely obnoxious. He's cheap. He's ruthlessly cheap. And if there's anything that D&D players hate is a guy giving quests who's cheap. So he wants to tax their treasure when it comes back in. He complains when he has to pay them. They were sent from another king, and he's now obligated to pay them what the other king was paying them. And he's saying how the other king's trying to bankrupt them all the time. Every time he sees them, so he's just an obnoxious character. And they didn't like him. They loathed him. They didn't like to do anything for him. Everything was like, do we really want to help this guy? And they're constantly trying to figure out ways that they can smuggle their treasure in so they don't have to pay these taxes. So he's already kind of got this thing going. Now they come across this ring, this magic ring, and I'm hell for throwing cursed items at my players. So nobody wants to put this ring on their finger because it came off of this like really evil cleric. Um, so nobody wants to put this ring on their finger before they can get it checked out. So they're on their way to get it checked out to this other high wizard, and for whatever reason, they decide that it's going to be best kept safe in the vault at Hammerfell's place. So when he sees this ring, right, he keeps it for himself.
Makes sense.
So now they're like, yo, this is a magic ring, and there wasn't a lot of magic rings floating around. There's not a lot of magic in my world. So for them to finally find a ring, they give it to this. They actually gave it to a sister for safekeeping in their vault, and then it disappears out of the vault, and he takes it. So now they absolutely hate this guy with a passion, and the ring has corrupted him. So
Right.
now I took somebody that they really didn't like, they had some issues with, they had some problems with him. He already has power, and now he's being corrupted by an evil ring. And
And
he is now villainous.
that's interesting because that's also the players can put it on themselves. If the players bring it on themselves, it's almost even better, right? Because
Yeah.
if they would have kept the ring away from him, then you wouldn't have had this problem. But they're the ones that thought up the bright idea
Yes.
to bring it into town in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I think
It,
another interesting thing when you look at villains too, and it's something that I had jotted down that you not all villains have to be tough. I think that's probably one of the most interesting things you've seen if you've got a villain who um, likes to run away or is the little skeevy guy or whatever that and they almost take pity on him, like you don't want to kill him. I was playing in a campaign of off the anime Black Lagoon, and in the town there was this like kind of sweaty guy, and he would always work for the whoever our characters were opposing at the particular time, and he'd come up with 4 or 5 guys, and set some ambush for you. You kill off the guys, he throws the gun out. Oh, don't kill me! I was just joking, guy. I, he's always that guy, and then they always have to take pity on him, like, yeah, get out of here, so and so. And then the next time he'll be back telling you how he's going to kill you again. You do the same thing. So it's kind of funny if you have one of those characters too, and you could also use them in a usual suspects kind of thing where you keep letting him go, but you didn't realize he's actually the big guy, but there's all kinds of interesting wrinkles again in the layers that you talk about with that. So
yeah.
using a very weak boss is also kind of fun, or somebody that continually irritates people, but not to the point of death.
Lane says, what is better or worse is infighting or loathing between player characters. Compelling villain. That I mean, I don't know how every DM runs their table. For me, player infighting is counterconductive to what I'm doing at my table.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Even though you do it when you're a player, because
Yeah,
I've run you and you were up in the business of a couple
yeah,
people.
I
Yeah.
do. Well, I mean, I had a dwarf cleric. You know what I'm saying? And he has certain standards before he's going to give the blessings of
Uh-huh.
his god out. Not every half orc and halfling thief is worthy of
Yeah.
blessings.
Yeah. Sure.
But that I'm talking about infighting where you have a player who steals. You got that thief character and he steals stuff. Or you got a player, he sees another character has got a magic sword that he didn't get through the distribution of magic items, and so at nighttime he kills them.
Right.
That kind of infighting can kind of really be counterproductive. But if you have a solid villain there, that villain brings the party together under a common banner. That now that the goal isn't, well, let's amass as much gold as we can, or let's collect as many magic items as we can. It's let's get this bastard Hammerfell before he passes any more laws or steals any more of our stuff or sends assassins after us, so we stop asking questions about this ring.
Right. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Even in that party, you can bring a party together, stopping some of them. Like, we'll put our stuff to the side,
Yep.
and so we can deal with something that we all really can't stand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you always want to give players, agency, and you don't. I mean, the very nature of being able to play role playing games is to make your own decisions, whatever that decision may be. But you're trying to encourage a heroic story, and you're trying to encourage your players, to work together, because 4 players working together can overcome a greater threat, villain, challenge than 1 player working together, or 2 players working against 2 players.
Right. And I mean, typically when you're running anything like that, I feel like there's always a running clock. Like, eventually that's going to destroy your party. It never
Yeah,
works out in the end unless
yeah.
you can divert that in some fashion, and then people could just walk away to another campaign. Because there's always somebody that won't give up that ghost, right? If they've got nothing else to concentrate on, they'll concentrate on the feud
I
within the
almost feel
feud.
like if you have a group and like they are doing player fighting, player infighter in player versus player fighting kind of thing, and they're cool with that. You're almost better off just taking all this stuff about compelling villains and maybe just throwing that all out the window and just throwing out a dungeon crawl with a whole bunch of treasure and stuff in it where they start gathering up this loot and jealousy starts taking over and now they become their own villains, you know?
I suppose, but you're still ending off the campaign, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
it's not continuing.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
that's an end game where I'm just going to let you guys hash
Yeah.
it out, and we'll start something new afterwards because it's not going to end well.
No.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. Well, yeah. I mean, it's the best of a bad situation, I guess, at that point, because it's never a good deal when players start infighting. Never it is. So,
Right. And also villains are kind of interesting in the fact because we're talking about specific physical villains. I've had campaigns, I found a massive campaign that I was a player in that we went years and years fighting against an organization
huh?
as evil. It was a group of monks called the Circle, and they distributed this black lotus juice. And wherever we went, there were these smuggling monks, and they were always out to get us. And there was no head monk. We never knew who the head of the organization was. It was just this organization. But it gave also an onus for the DM to continually build on those monks, build this organization, make a high criminal organization. It took place in the Forgotten Realms, and they were just in all the cities and every place, and they were always up to no good, and that is something that can be utilized as well. It's like the Red Wizards of Thay, right? If you're in Forgotten Realms, that's another great organization or a nation where you could have them as your boss, your typical evil. And if you wanted to, you can always put in a lieutenant or a leader or something like that. But you
Mhm.
could also take it as a much broader sense in just fighting against a force. And you could use the same thing, let's say like Cyberpunk, a mega corporation that you don't particularly like, Renreku or something like that. If you're in Shadowrun, they've got a bone to pick with you, and you've got a bone to pick with them. And it's just that's the way it goes. So you can do that all across the board, making a bigger or more diverse boss or enemy, as that they're just wholly evil on their corporate structure. Yeah.
Mhm. And I think most game settings, have the story that you can put that in. That they have that somewhere layered into their backstory. Some place. Like whether it's Shadowrun, a corporation. Even a Robotech. Like maybe it's the what is it, the Mercantile Republic or Merchant Republic, or the EBSIS. The
Yeah.
remnant of
Yeah.
Germany
Yeah.
and Russia.
EBSIS is always fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
If you're
these
wanting to
are
do something
great.
outside of the three
Great
enemies.
organizations. Um, that are well worth exploring. And to explore the world also, a lot of times I charge my players through the nose for upkeep. I make them, we do first edition. So, every player character's got to pay 100 gold pieces per level by the rules every month just to maintain their standard of living at the adventurers, the level they are. When they want to advance in levels, 1,500 experience, 1,500 gold pieces for each level that they're trying to attain. So it's an expensive proposition, and my players bitch and complain like I'm really taking money out of their pockets. They're always like, oh, we're always broke, we don't have any money, and um, and I do that for a couple reasons. I want to make things difficult for them because the more difficult it is to accomplish goals, when you do accomplish them, which they always do, maybe not 100%, but they accomplish their goals, it becomes that much more rewarding. And if you're putting together a villain and you have these other aspects that are into play, like to make the world a more real place, you have more cards in your deck about what can power this villain or what the villain's agenda is or how the villain is going to influence the players.
Right. Yeah. For sure. It's funny to talk about money. I've played in Conan, and one of the base rules of Conan is whenever you get into a city and you come in from whatever adventure you're on, all the gold that you have is gone when you leave. Like you've just spent it, like in the houses of ill repute, drinking, what you just spend it, and so you're gonna be broke when you go out anyway. So always gives nobody's just like has gold on them, they and that always gives you the reason you have to go out. It's just that's a rule that
Yeah.
money is gone, which is kind of interesting, just as a money scape. But another thing when you're looking at evil too, and this is one of my absolute favorites, is dealing with evil that believes it's good. That is my absolute favorite. That's the Spanish Inquisition. That is somebody who thinks they're doing the absolute good,
Yes.
and they're absolutely evil.
Yes.
In what they're doing, and nothing can frustrate a character more or players more than seeing something like that happen, seeing the injustice of it, seeing what's going on, and having to try to deal with that. That's where you're dealing with the high piety of a church or a paladinic organization that actually tips that scale. They're so good they go over to evil and they don't even realize it.
Yeah.
That can be a very, very interesting villain too, in dealing with stuff like that. So there's another great villain to use in the course of building stuff. Is to go that route where they, you can't reason with them because they think they're doing the right thing. They don't embrace evil. They really embrace good. It's just that good, happens to hurt and harm and do everything wrong. Yeah.
When I was talking about Sakatha earlier, in that first campaign that I was running, it took place over like a long period of time in game world, like centuries of time, and the characters would jump through for different adventures. Time moves faster in the outside world than in the inside world, and so things like this would happen, and the outside world time would progress like in steps, 10 years, 20 years, whatever I needed to kind of make the story work along the way it's supposed to. So they started out, one of the early adventures, they went through the Saltmarsh series. And for those of you that are familiar with it or not familiar with it, there's one point where the players start to that they come across the tribe of lizard men, and they work with the lizard men to fight a Sahuagin threat.
Yep.
Well, the guy who was the head of the lizard men, I decided was going to be Sakatha's father. So I sort of started laying a groundwork where he was kind of a heroic individual, which he was because he was opposing these Sahuagin, and they sort of formed a relationship with him. And then he had a child who was Sakatha, and Sakatha grew up to be the new head of the lizard men. And at the time, there was a undead menace that was coming down from the north. And Sakatha was one of the leaders that was keeping them at bay. So the players kind of got the feel of him as a hero, and as because he was doing heroic things. He was saving lives, he was pushing back the undead, he was doing good things. But then gradually power corrupted him, and they got to see him start to turn evil in his ways. But Sakatha always felt like he was doing good, like he was doing what he needed to do to preserve the living, the world of the living, and fight back the world of the dead. But he turned horribly evil in the process of making that, making his plans work. So
Right. I mean that's a perfectly good example.
yeah.
I had one where one of the player characters was a young good wizard, an apprentice, a girl, and she was on one of the first adventures. She was captured by were rats. The old were rats tale right
They're
there.
always good for
Godfuck.
capturing wayward girls. Nothing
Right,
captures a
wayward
wayward
girls.
girl
Anyway,
as good as
they
were
did their business or whatever, and she never got over it, right? But nobody understands the character in the course of then leveling up and going on other adventures and epic campaigns. By the time she ends, she's the head of the Order of the White Robes. These the highest of the good wizards, but she never got over that initial thing. Therefore, she was always obsessed with lycanthropy and was trying to find things against it, and eventually lost it, right? On that quest. And it took all the other players, wizards, getting together at some point later and having to fight against her in a titanic battle that they could have very well lost. But to bring her down because she thinks she's doing something good. I've got to wipe out lycanthropy, which you think that's a perfectly good thing, but the various things she was doing to achieve that weren't good for everybody.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, and so that's the problem. But there's and that was a player character that actually fell. So it's kind of interesting too to use, especially if you're using something on an extended campaign. If you've got characters and you abandon a campaign, or you say this campaign's over, we got 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever level, and now I'm going to go into something else. We're going to play something else, and when you come back in, you don't use those characters, but you have the overall world. Having the ability to take a character that you know that has a fleck of a backstory from another one, and then they're like, we all know John because we adventured with John, and then John turns into the arch demon duke John, who went askew somewhere in the future. But they have a personal relationship, or at least maybe the characters don't, but the players do, and they understand what might have caused John to do this. That makes for a great enemy as well. If you can pull something out of your world that's already been used, especially for people like us or Lane or somebody like that that's been playing for 40 plus years, you've got a lot of stories and a lot of threads and a lot of different worlds, be it Orth, be it Forgotten Realms, My Nameless Realms, your world. I mean, there's so many different places that you may have played that you can then pluck those things out of and use at a later point, or a child or somebody that you know.
Players delight in when characters make cameos from old campaigns and stuff like that. They absolutely love it. They always love it. Sometimes they pretend that they hate it. Oh, this guy. Yeah, they love that. Yeah, I got you. You love it. They absolutely love it. I just threw my whole campaign. My players have we played a campaign, and it was rough and it was hard, and it went into COVID time, and things just kind of didn't work for the campaign. At least I felt like they weren't working. So we ended up stopping the campaign. And when we stopped the campaign, now everybody, and it was COVID time, we were doing it on Roll20 and nobody could get together. Things relaxed a little bit, and we started playing again, and I started a new campaign. But they're always complaining. Oh, that was the best campaign. Oh, we loved it. I'm like, you jokers didn't love it when you were in it. You didn't love it. You complained every time, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, we started to do a Warhammer campaign. We played that for a little bit. People weren't really digging the rules for it, so we stopped that. They were like, we want to do Dungeons and Dragons. I said, okay, you know what? I'll run another D&D campaign, and we'll play in the Mystara world. We won't rehash Greyhawk, which was where the first one was. We'll do Mystara. So I tell them this, but like every good DM, I'm lying through my teeth. What the Mystara is in this particular world is a fantasy world that one of their old characters made like a children's story, like he started writing books, and they were based in this world called Mystara. And now the world is kind of fallen apart, and there's only a small area that still is held by humanity. And they have taken these books that he's written, and because they don't really know geography, they've assumed that these books are what the world is like. So their world is Mystara. It's not Mystara at all. It's Greyhawk. It's a post-apocalyptic Greyhawk. And so now they're playing in this, but the cameos are starting to come through. Like, they are starting to get and grasp that, wait a minute, we're not really in Mystara. We're seeing cameos. We're seeing old villains come up. We're seeing old heroes and old characters shades of, like magic items that they had are starting to reappear. And they're like, as I watch the revelation come through to them, or these cameos are coming in, like I just gave them a scroll that was written from one of their old characters to this wizard. They were like, oh man. And it was a really cool moment at the table. And I'm glad the stuff is coming together, the way it's coming together. But old campaigns, like you said, are an awesome source of new material for new campaigns.
Right.
Awesome.
Be that an evil boss, or be that just bringing in things like that. But again, that not everyone plays like that. Not everyone plays with a 40-year-old worlds or stuff like that. So
That's
you got to
true.
take them through it. But if you have it, or you've been playing for a long time with people, that's it's a treasure trove to just delve into and bring stuff
Yeah.
out of.
But you know what? People do have those 40-year-old worlds. We're the people that are dealing with us are not 20-year-old gamers. You know what I'm saying?
Most
Right.
likely, yeah.
I'm not. I mean, my base is 40-year-old people. 40,
Right.
50-year-old people, or older. I'm not throwing out throwing out Lane's age there, but
Right. We don't need to
yeah, we're
call
not
Lane
throwing
out
that.
on
No,
this one.
I'm not putting Lane under the bus. But they're older players. So yeah, they've got some gaming history, They can pull stuff out of the old memory banks. And especially if they're blessed enough to be playing with people like you do, people that you've played with forever, and that you have all these years of gaming experience with, that's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean that, we've talked about it before. I think that's really, I mean that's the key to great role playing, a role playing experience is to have that or build on it. It's never about the dice.
Hmm.
It's never about the random magic items. It's about the relationships and what stories you can tell that mean something to you about the characters involved or the campaign involved. That's why it's kind of interesting to me to see, not to call anything out here, but the new Wizards of the Coast virtual tabletop, which we've seen some stuff for. I'm like, is it a video game, or is it or are you sitting around a table telling a story, right? Because I feel like the storytelling is what has made this genre last so long in the face of video games that were supposed to kill it, and cards that were supposed to kill it. Everything is supposed to have killed D&D, and it never did. So it's kind of interesting to me to see what vein that takes, because it doesn't seem to be the true onus. Microtransactions don't seem to be the true onus of why we sit and play these games, and why
Yeah.
we've devoted so many years of our lives to doing it.
Yeah. I I don't know. Guys that are our age, yeah, that is just, it's not role playing games, and we can, but when you're talking about a 20-year-old people, 30-year-old people, people that are living professional lives, and their tabletop, the people around their tabletop is spread across the country, or across the world.
Right.
Um, something like that. Roll 20 has its place. I can see a virtual tabletop really attracting a lot of people. I think that the one D&D, what we're looking at is the future of gaming. Not saying that it's a bright future, but it's the future. Just like AI art is progressing and making more of a headway, just like AI writing is progressing and making more of a headway. Virtual tabletops, and is it traditional
Well,
D&D? Not even close, but it's what you got.
yeah, we'll see. I mean, I guess it's the difference between playing virtually on Roll20 or something like that, or Fantasy Grounds, where we sit around and we talk like this, versus seeing a screen where your characters are moving around with little trinkets and whatever else, and throwing spells.
Yeah.
That's the difference. So I don't know if that makes a difference or not, or if the stories will stay the same. I guess time will tell on that one, right?
Yeah, and it's definitely going to change. I mean, you can see the progression. Like when we started, back in the Garrett Gygax age, everybody's sitting around a kitchen table. We got some kind of a hand drawn map on the table. If we're lucky, we got some graph paper. We've got some plastic cowboy and Indians and riflemen, plastic riflemen sitting on there talking about this is a goblin. Maybe if we're lucky, we had some old Ralph Parther or Grenadier medals that kind of sort of resembled the monster that it was supposed to be. And it was cool and we loved it. But now, things are progressing. People want miniatures that are more realistic. The resin miniature business has picked up because not just because it's cheaper, but because the miniatures are better. They got more detail. They look nicer. They're more crisp, and you're going to start seeing. And it's more, it's a more realistic representation because people don't have to connect now and visualize it in their mind. They can see it. That's where one D&D is going to come. Now they don't even need a figure. They don't have to worry about it being painted or any of that kind of stuff. Boom, it's right on their screen. And you'll see it, it'll progress. They'll get a magic item. Oh, you found a staff of the Magi. Now your character has a staff that has magic effects and stuff on it. Oh, your character has a magic robe. Now your character is wearing a robe, and you'll be able to design the robe and all this kind of stuff. Pure video game? Uh-huh. But I think that's what people are really going to want, and that's the future of role playing. Yes, it's disgusting, but that's the future.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. That's what I said. We can only wait and see for that particular thing. But that existence has nothing to do with villains per se, unless you're painting someone else's villain.
Although the concept is a little bit villainous. The concept
right. In our minds it
is villainous.
Right.
It is truly, it's not a direct correlation.
we're not going in that place. But anyway, and I guess the only other thing I'd have is to add on villains is having the appropriate concepts of longevity, which means having something in your mind of what is this villain's purpose? How long would you assume they last? Obviously, I had campaigns once where, I'm sure a lot of DMs have had this, where the villain came in to like say something snide to somebody, and somebody decides to throw a dagger at him and kills them. It's that kind of thing where they just roll the nat 20 and there's nothing I can do about it. It's like, well, they're winning a whole campaign, but it still doesn't mean that you don't have campaigns where stuff has a longevity to it. And you don't want to, and when you're dealing with longevity on a boss, you don't want to make the players feel like they're being railroaded or they don't have a chance to kill this person, right?
Yeah.
Like there's diminishing returns on him just continuing to show up and get away before players get frustrated. So keep that in mind when you're GMing stuff like that too.
Villains are only, a villain is only as good as long as he remains villainous. As soon as the characters are like, they don't hate him anymore, he's just a grind for them, and he's just an annoyance. When he moves into that, and you have to have your finger. It's a thin line. You have to have your finger on the pulse of the table, and you have to realize, like, okay, they're not afraid of this guy anymore. He's not like, eliciting hatred out of them. They're just annoyed and bothered by him. Then it's time, a good villain is only there until the next good villain comes along.
Right.
Keep that cycle coming. Keep that cycle coming. You see, somebody else starts to rub them wrong, or somebody else is like, you know what, I think this character's cool. I would like to get, elaborate a little bit more, or I could see where this character could take the campaign someplace. Man, get rid of that other villain, Either make him go away so he can come back at a later time when he's fresh again, or let the players have the satisfaction of one-upping him and killing him. If you can do it, and the more climactic that their comeuppance is, and the more they can pound this villain down into the ground, the better it is.
Right. I recently had something happen where a villain played out, where it was a villain was talking to one of the characters, had been messing within the course of the character's life, and the character was finally like, I'm done, and like legit, like, hey, I'm done. Like it was like she projected into the room to say something about something. It was just like, I'm done. I walk out of the room. It was just like, well, and I'm in my head, I'm like, you're costing somebody their lives by walking out of that room, but it's like they didn't care. Like, I'm just done. Kill somebody. I don't. And then they walked in the next day, and their secretary was dead, and it was like, I don't care. It wasn't my secretary. It was like it was the secretary for the office. Oh well, I just go back to my desk and sit down. They were just done. Like that villain had played its purpose. They wanted no part of it anymore. Like that. Yeah. So that happens. Like you can overplay your hand. In a villain. You gotta watch that.
And you gotta give the villain something. You gotta give him. Going back to the very beginning, that Temple of Elemental Evil Priest had something that the players wanted. The villain's got to have something that the players want. And if you're going to put, if you're putting something out there like, all right, well, somebody will die if you don't do this. If the villain is threatening people or something that the players don't have a vested interest in, the players, not the characters, the players, because that's who's sitting around your table. That's whose emotions you're trying to stir up, not the characters. They don't exist, only in their minds. But the players. Now, if that secretary, you had spent the prior 2 weeks or the prior 2 months, and she's now in a love affair with one of the characters, and the character enjoys having her around and having her in the story in that capacity. Now, he's not going to walk out of the room because he knows.
But it got to the point where, I mean, in that particular situation, you didn't even get to the punchline of it. You didn't even get to the threat of killing somebody. In my head, I knew somebody was going to die, but they didn't even care. But that's overplaying your hand as a DM, because that character specifically had a wife that was on the string, basically, of this and to get at him, destroyed the wife. Well, there was your leverage, right? But I didn't go to that. I was like, well, I still think I can push him. No, I can't. That leverage is gone. If that leverage is not there, you're out. So that was one of those things that if you don't have that connection, which he did with the wife, then you're out, and that character has served its purpose. You can no longer mess with me. I'm not allowing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unless they were Lex Luthor. True. Unless they were Lex Luthor.
So nevertheless,
up and beat villains to death, man. I think we covered all angles on making good example. We gave examples. We talked about different strategies. Talked about different villains.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we covered. it. People, I guess, can leave questions, comments, and descriptions in YouTube if they want.
Right.
But yeah, I think we're good on this.
Or tell us a villain that we missed. That's always something good. I'm sure there's somebody. Obviously, I haven't covered everything, but yeah, there's something out there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'd love to see those comments below if you guys do view this. And otherwise, I guess that's it for this week, right?
That's it for this week. If you guys want to see something, want us to address something, talk about something, drop us a letter, let us know, and we will put that on our schedule and our agenda.
Yeah, to talk about, because we're always looking for good stuff to talk about. That's true. All right. Well, otherwise, as always, from Art of the Genre, great gaming. And what do you got to say, Hal?
See you later from the 13th Warlock.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Later, everyone.